What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So Riot Reef 3 has recently put out a developer blog on behalf of the Champion Update team, goes by the name of the State of the Champion Update, and it was packed with just a ton of super awesome new information about what the Champion Update team has been working on, and one of the most exciting things to read was the announcement of the very next class update, which has been finally confirmed to be tanks. We kind of knew that it was going to be tanks for quite some time now, but it's nice to have the absolute 100% without a doubt confirmation. So today we're sharing what we know about the upcoming tank class update and which champions are extremely likely to end up being targeted for both bigger and smaller scale reworks. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button and let's get started. So with tanks being locked in as the next class update, a lot of people are probably going to be wondering, which tanks are going to be looked at. After all, we did have a Juggernaut update, which was kind of like a subset of tanks, I guess, way back in the day, but that was actually quite some time ago. Well, this time Riot's going to be looking at all the tanks in general, but the major focus point for significant kit reworks here is going to be on the initiating tanks, which Riot refers to as Vanguards. The aim of this class update is actually pretty simple, as it does fall in line with what previous class updates have been aiming to do, which is to give each champion their own unique identities. The other goal of the update here is to give tanks their own forms of both mastery and skill expression. Riot Reef 3 was clear on this point that he didn't mean that they want every tanky champion to require really high mechanical skill to use properly, but right now tanks are actually a bit of a flat line when it comes to mastery, because they all behave and, interact and function in really similar ways, and as well fill the same kind of role in a game. And for Vanguard specifically, especially, this is a big problem. They kind of just all get really tanky, they all initiate fights with their ultimates or crowd control abilities or what have you, and once you've successfully engaged the enemy team with one of the Vanguard champions, you kind of just soak as much damage as you can, protect your team, and your job's pretty much done. Now that's not necessarily a negative thing, but it can often feel like all you can really do with the different tanks is to maybe optimize your item build and I guess sequence your abilities properly, and compare that to other classes like mages or definitely assassins. They've all got really varied kits and distinct approaches to different situations. So the more you practice them, the more you feel like you unlock their potential, and it's very rewarding to play those champions for an extended period of time. When it comes to initiating tanks though, you kind of just learn to dive in, crowd control, and soak some damage, and that's kind of about it, and players deserve to feel like they are actively improving in a more significant way when they continue practicing on a champion. And to be able to do that, tanks are going to require a little bit more depth to each of their individual kits. As they are right now, tanks have what Riot refers to as a flat mastery curve. Essentially, instead of, constantly improving the more you play them more and more, and you could play hundreds of games and you'll still be learning new things. Instead, you kind of just figure out how they work and act in the game, and then you're really just limited by their kits, and you're kind of unable to really progress significantly any further with the champion kits in specific. Another pretty key issue with tanks right now is they actually do tend to underperform in the jungle quite a lot compared to other junglers, at least right now, especially when the jungle itself is strong, like the jungle monsters. Whenever there's been a point in the game's history that the jungle has been harder to clear, tank junglers have suffered a lot because they just can't take advantage of all of the resources that the jungle provides. Instead, in those situations, we've ended up with carry junglers, the guys like Lee Sin, Vi, Hecarim. Those types of champions tend to shine a lot more because they've got the scaling, they've got the carry potential from their own damage, so they don't really suffer as much from the harder jungle, and generally they just have an easier time clearing the jungle because they have more damage while still being, reasonably tanky enough to survive in the jungle, that is. The fact that all of the tanks have similar kits and poor overall damage means that they struggle to compete with the carry junglers in a lot of situations, and that's definitely going to be a major issue in Season 7 because the jungle is pretty challenging by design now. And this ties in pretty well with the issue of unique identities. Right now, Vanguards all kind of do pretty much the exact same thing, at least in terms of the role that they play in the game. And Riot Reef 3 describes this as being kind of like different versions of a Mumu almost. They dive into a fight, unleash some area of effect crowd control abilities to lock down the enemy team, and they kind of just waddle about, soaking and dealing minor damage whenever they can. So for a Mumu, that's going to be the bandage toss in, Curse of the Sad Money with the ultimate, and then he kind of doesn't have that much more impact in the rest of the fight, and he kind of just, wanders around, tries to do as much damage as he can, but is never really like a relevant damage source. Same goes for characters like Malphite, uses his R, maybe a Q, kind of just doesn't do that much for the rest of the fight. Same goes for really most of the other tanks too, Sejuani, all sorts of guys. And definitely the main goal of the class update is really going to be to break the monotony of this design, and as well to introduce more interesting ways to initiate fights and to actually give the tanks a way to take part in team fights after they've used, their long cooldown ultimate, after the team fight has been initiated. So apart from actual champion gameplay kits, something that Riot have also mentioned that they'll be looking at is defensive items, and how champions engage with them, whether they are tanks or non-tanks alike. So right now, non-tank champions actually get equal or even greater benefits from certain tank items than tanks themselves do, and that's something that Riot definitely wants to change in the future, so that tanks can actively do their role of being tanky damage sponges without, introducing some buffs to non-tank classes. Compare this to something like maybe an AD carry picking up a mage item. It's going to be a total waste of gold compared to someone buying an actual AD carry item instead. This is a pretty big indicator that Riot is going to be completely redesigning tank items, so that tanks synergize with them significantly better than any other class in the game, making them to where they become really just completely suboptimal purchases for non-tank champions. Another potential fix that Riot have mentioned for this is to maybe make tanks a lot more naturally tanky and to lower the tankiness given by the stats from actual tank items. But that does have a pretty major issue of giving tanks, some really insane early games and some actual pretty powerful scaling as well, and making it so that being denied gold doesn't actually punish tanks all that much, definitely nowhere near enough. And that would likely lead to, some weird strategies and stuff, so it's probably not going to be the way that they go. It does seem like there's going to be a big revamp to the items. A better solution to this perhaps would be to introduce more forms of scaling to tank champions, maybe similar to how Malphite's Ground Slam scales with his armor, something like that. Doing that could encourage tanks to build tank items over damage items, and it would also make those items far more cost efficient for tanks compared to other champions. It's going to be interesting to see how they implement this in specific, but definitely expect some major changes to all of the tank items. Now, as far as the specific champions that we can say are going to be targeted for some larger scale reworks, the specific ones aren't 100%, completely confirmed yet, but we do have a very, very good idea of what we can expect, and we've pieced together things from a ton of different rider posts on the message boards, and I would say that we have, we can make a pretty accurate prediction of what we can expect in the future. So the first champion who's actually a huge potential candidate for one of the larger scale reworks in the class update, which is actually kind of surprising to me, but definitely really cool to see, is going to be Nunu. So in terms of art assets, Nunu is actually really outdated, and he definitely fails on his archetype enough that a full visual update could actually be kind of justifiable for Nunu, but on the other hand, Nunu's gameplay concept as like the anti-jungler character is actually really good, and his consumability is just unlike anything else in the game, but his kit just doesn't have the best synergy, his W doesn't really do anything for his game plan most of the time, especially in the jungle, but it would only really take one or two major ability changes to get Nunu into a state that really feels fresh and modern. Consume, Ice Blast, and Absolute Zero are all really cool abilities that would likely stick around if Nunu was reworked, but Blood Boil and his passive Visionary do leave a little bit to be desired in the jungle game plan for Nunu, and it's definitely well within the scope of the tank roster update. But there's kind of one major issue with Nunu. He's not actually a Vanguard tank, he's not looking to engage for his team, so he doesn't align perfectly with the goals of the tank class update as a whole, but there's definitely a lot of potential to improve him, and I would definitely expect Nunu to be one of the major reworks in the tank update. So we've also mentioned Amumu as one of the other key vanguards that Riot are looking at in terms of figuring out how they can make tank gameplay more exciting, which as well, in addition to Amumu, is going to bring us to one of his counterparts, Sejuani. In essence, they both do the exact same thing in game, which is, gap close, AoE crowd control the enemy team, and then deal some, not so relevant damage, mostly in AoE form. And the champions that are very similar to one another, Amumu, Sejuani as well, I'd actually probably toss in Malphite to that too. Those guys are definitely going to be hit with some changes. Maybe not necessarily a large-scale rework, but I would expect all three of them to get some kind of rework, and probably at least one of them to get a large-scale rework, even if it's just, to help differentiate between the different champions and give players an actual reason to pick one over the other. Now, Riot haven't said which one is likely to get the larger amount of changes, but I would put my money on probably Sejuani being the one getting a more significant rework compared to the others. The biggest thing that makes us lean towards Sejuani is that she really does feel like she has a lot more room for change than Amumu and Malphite. She's got a lot more potential for her archetype that could be improved. It seems like Sejuani's definitely going to be the way to go. It could be possible that they rework more than one of those in terms of the larger scale reworks, but I would definitely expect Sejuani to get a larger scale rework as well. Next up, we also have Maokai, who's another champion that kind of always comes up, as I mentioned, whenever Riot discusses the state of tanks in-game. Like the other Vanguard champions, he's got a pretty similar playstyle, use an ability to gap close, crowd control some people, disrupt the enemy team. Unlike the other initiator tanks though, Maokai is a little bit more single target focused, and he's also a little bit more focused on defending his own team as well, rather than, making a really nice initiation to help kill the enemy team, which makes him an awesome champion for peeling for his squishy teammates, and it also makes him a little bit of an exception to the Vanguard class. His abilities are all, pretty fluid and fun to use. Sapling Toss is kind of a fun little gimmick to set him apart and make him a little bit more unique, which means that he is definitely in a better state right now than some of the other potential candidates, but he has been one of the characters that was mentioned by Rioters, so it'll be really interesting to see if Riot decides to change him up as one of the larger scale reworks, or maybe just, give him some tweaks to modernize his character. Either way though, looks like that's just about going to wrap up things on the future rework of tanks, everything that we know so far. They've definitely been one of the more polarizing and annoyingly dominant classes in the history of the meta, so hopefully Riot does a really good job of making them healthy, a lot more fun to play too especially, and definitely a lot more unique from one another. There's a lot more champions out there that we didn't mention that could definitely do with some love. Guys like Shen has been mentioned as well. Zac, I think, is another one. There's quite a few champions that could be affected in this rework, and it is definitely possible that Riot could do more than the usual 4 large-scale reworks. So, as a whole, I gotta say I'm definitely excited for the tank update in general. Either way though, looks like that's gonna be it from me. If you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.